All right, this is Isaiah Colton with another episode of Renegade CEO, and I am really excited about the guest that I have today, Donnie Morrow, who is just an absolute rock star real estate entrepreneur. And the series is all about telling stories on how people in the real estate industry have gone from not becoming a top producer, but then having to learn how to be a CEO, because those are two different skill sets. And I'm really excited to have Donnie on with me to tell his story about how he got involved in real estate and the transition he's made to grow a team and really take on the full breadth of being a CEO with multiple divisions, of income in real estate. So Donnie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Isaiah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this offline, Donnie, but I think that one of the things that I personally get out of doing these podcasts is hearing people's backstory and picking out the lessons that kind of are learned as I'm listening to the story along the way. So I'd like to start off with just talking pre-real estate, like just a little bit of a glimpse of how you grew up, and and then like how you grew up and how the heck that led to you to getting involved in real estate. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, man, that's going way back because I'm
Yeah.
turn 49 tomorrow.
You look
So
good,
that's
man.
way back.
I would have thought mid 30s, late 30s, bro. You look good.
Oh, well, thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, 32 years of hard work to try to stay halfway young, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, so man, I grew up in a suburb outside of Memphis, kind of the no red light town at all, just a couple gas stations on 120 acres. I am just a country kid, honestly. Went in the Army 17 days out of high school. Could have gone to college, graduated like ninth in my high school class or 10th, something like that, but just chose to go in the Army. And I was just, it's kind of weird because it's just one of those things where I was like, what do I want to go to college at 18 years old for and do for the rest of my life? And there was nothing there. My one real passion probably was cars, which it still is. I own several nowadays.
Give
But
us
I
give us
also
your Can you tell us what your favorite car is that you own right now? Is that cool? Is that okay?
Man, my favorite that I
What's your
own
favorite?
right
Yeah.
now. I always have a hard time picking a favorite because I like anything that is cool. But my biggest project the last couple of years has been my '87 C10, and it's sitting in his shop right now. My dad's helping me put a crate motor in it, so it's really cool because I get to hang out with him because, of course, he's the one that kind
That's
of
awesome,
taught me
man.
how to work and stuff to begin with. So yeah,
That's cool. What a great way to connect with pops. That's cool.
yeah,
Anyway, I didn't mean to
yeah.
throw you
So
off your
there you
story. I
go.
was just curious about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I knew if I became a mechanic, I was going to end up hating my hobby, right? Because everything gets old if you have to do it for a living. It seems like, and especially working on cars because it doesn't pay a lot of money.
Right.
So I decided to go in the army instead. So I went in the army for a few years. During high school, I'd actually worked at Sonics. I don't know if you have those where you are,
Oh
not with
yeah.
the
Yep.
drive-in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Delta Sonics.
So
Is that
yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So when I got out of the army 4 years later, I basically called my boss that I worked for in high school, like, "Hey, I need a reference." And he's like, "How much do you make a week?" I was like, $500 a week in the army. He said, "I'll pay you 550 to come back and work for me." I was like, "Oh, I'm there. I've got a 2 year old.
No.
I got married at 19. I've been married for 29 years now. My daughter's
Wow.
29." And I was like, "Yeah, I got to feed my kid. I'm on my way." Right? Not that I really wanted to work fast food my whole life, but it was just there as an opportunity. Needless to say, I knew how to work really hard, and there to manage and move up, they kind of expect about 60 hours a week minimum. And I knew how to do that. I knew not many people could outwork me. So I actually became a store manager in about 11 months, 23 years old. I was still 22 technically, straight out of the army, honestly making really good money for a
Right.
22-year-old in
Yeah.
1999.
Store
Um,
managers, if it's the right store, in your young 20s, that's good money. That's good
right,
money. In
absolutely.
young 20s, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man. So it was good as far as that goes. And I always wanted to make money. That was one thing. That's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get out of the army. I was just like, no matter what I do here, I'm only going to make whatever my rank is. Other people can be slackers. It's, whatever. It's set pay. There's no way for me to truly excel monetarily here.
Hmm.
And even at a young age, I was interested in those kind of things. That's just where I always wanted to be. I used to joke, and all my friends would mess with me in the army because I'm like, I found out like at that time the CEO of Coca-Cola made like $1 million. I was like, people make $1 million for jobs. I'm like, yeah, I want to be a CEO of Coca-Cola or something, right? So anyway, worked my way up. Eventually, actually became a part owner in three Sonics. Made good money, but
Hmm.
honestly, hated the hours of the job. And didn't love having 150 teenage employees. Loved the people, but didn't necessarily love being responsible for them, right? And ultimately, what happened is I was missing my kids growing up. I was doing pretty well monetarily, decent six-figure income, especially in Memphis, Tennessee, but not really enjoying life at all. But of course, in my 20s, hey, how do I take care of my kids? How do I make sure my kids can go to college? Whatever the case might be, that was all good. As I got to be about 34, my oldest daughter was going into high school. And of course, then I was in my 30s, and I was like, if I stay on this path, I am going to completely miss my kids growing up, and you cannot ever get this time back. Never.
Yes.
And I wanted to get back. I guess I still had a little bit of that military serving the community in me. So I actually went
Yeah.
and became a police officer, took a six-figure pay cut
Wow.
to become a police officer.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, I did.
Holy
So
cow.
just kind of unwhelmed, like actually, and this was, of course, during the 2008-9 recession. And I remember actually saving up like $50,000 and paying my house down so that I could refinance it because it had gone down so much in value so that I could afford a payment on a police officer's salary because my house payment when I
Wow.
decided to become a police officer was more than what police officers brought home as a rookie.
Yeah, that
So I
2007, 2008 era in real estate that's when it started getting wild, right? So like,
yes.
so that's, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So it was kind of crazy. So anyway, went and became a police officer. By the way, loved being a police officer. Memphis has a really, really good crisis intervention team for mental consumers, which was what was my favorite thing to do. You get to
Wow.
know the families, they request you in person, and honestly, the well-trained crisis intervention officer is the one who kind of saves everybody's lives in regard to protecting other officers from themselves or the mental consumer from the officers if they don't know how to handle them, vice versa, whatever the case might be. So I did really enjoy that because you get to really serve the community in that regard. During that time, though, I was like, man, I got to make some money. I just took a six-figure pay cut. I've got to make some money. Real estate had always been in the back of my mind. I had even looked at getting my real estate license, man, in like 2002, but there was just no way I could do it working 100 hours a week at the restaurant.
Right.
So once I got out of police academy, did police work for a couple years, really did enjoy it, never dreaded going to work or anything like that. But I was just like, man, I want to make some money. I got to do
Yeah.
something,
Yep.
So I said, I'm going to go get my real estate license. I need to make $1,500 a month to pay my house note. That's my only debt. And I'll do that until I'm 55. I'll retire from the police department, and then I would have a little real estate business to supplement my
Right.
pension, not have to get another career at 55.
Right.
Well, within my first 12 months after I got my license, I sold 15 houses at night. My first full calendar year, I got my
Wow, I
license in
love
like
that.
July of 2013. My first calendar year, which was 2014, I sold 35 at night. So that was kind of like
Wow.
ride a squad car from 7 to 3, change clothes somewhere, go show houses till dark, do paperwork till 11 o'clock at night, get up the next day and do it
So
again.
here's why I love this. Here's why I love this story is because there's people listening to this right now that you have a limiting belief in your mind that the reason why you're not achieving your goal is because of time. And this is why I love these stories because almost every podcast that I do when I hear these stories, the one I did last week, you listened to Caitlin O'Connor. She had a full-time job at a sales and marketing company, and she still did 15, 20 transactions, going into year two. You guys, if you're listening to these series of podcasts, you should hear similar stories. Donnie, I love that. That's incredible. So year two, if I heard you correctly, you did 30 to
Yeah,
35
so it was my
transactions.
first full calendar year. So
Your
basically,
first,
it was my
okay,
sixth and my 18th month in business.
in business. Wow,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just that's just
Mhm.
I love that. I love that story. And talk a little bit about that just before we move forward because I want to make sure we're capturing the things of value for all of the audiences, whether they're a new agent, producer, team, inspiring team leader, etc. what how did you pull that off and having a pull
Yeah.
like what were a
So
couple of key things that you did to make that work?
yeah, so I think I had a couple advantages because I will be the first person to say we don't all start in the same place. I'll also be the first person to say that we can all probably end in the same place if we want it bad enough. Like I'm never going to be LeBron, but when it comes to selling real estate, we can do it, right? And that's one of the things I
Right. We're
love
not
about
it's
it.
not
Okay.
rocket science and we don't have to figure out how to dunk, right? Yeah. So
That's
so
right. Exactly. Exactly. So honestly, I had a couple advantages starting out though that a lot of people would have to develop if they weren't me. Number one, I had ran a business for 13 years. I was the person doing the P&L. I knew from the very beginning what to do to make a business profitable. I understood customer service from running that business.
mm,
I used to serve 1,000 tickets a day,
big
right? I
time.
knew
Big
customer
time
service.
customer service. Yeah, that's a good call out.
Yes. So my Sonnet background in that regard helped. Also, it was nothing for me to work 100 hours a week. So I tell
We're
everybody
used to
now
it.
that,
Yeah.
right, I hire dual agent career. By the way, I don't hire anybody part time on my team, but I will hire dual career. Okay, notice the difference in terms there. If you think you're going to do real estate part time, I'm not going to lie to you and let you come into this with that belief because you're setting you up for
Mm,
failure. Okay,
mm,
so I looked at it as dual career, not part time, and that's the way I teach people to do it now because not everybody can be successful working two full time jobs. But I try to explain to people you are working two full time jobs. So because I was willing to do that and I was already used to it, wasn't the end of the world for me to do that.
mm.
And then third, your teachers, bartenders, first responders, people who have to deal with other people on that level and know how they're going to react to what they say also have an advantage. So I do believe I had an advantage from the police department as well, that I knew the little tricks and nuances of what to say,
Right.
even to the point that when I pulled a car over, I approached the window and said the same thing every time because if they wanted to shoot me, I wanted to throw them off their game and I wanted to know if they were lying to me. So it never bothered me to learn a script and use a script
Mm.
because I already realized that everybody in the world used scripts. So I will say I had some advantages, and hopefully people listening can learn from that because even if they haven't had that, they can still use those things to their advantage now that they know to make those adjustments.
That's huge.
So,
Okay,
yeah, so there you go.
so just to kind of summarize that, it was the you're used to working hard. That's the habits were there. Um, making sure that the second thing is make sure we understand the psychology of what makes people tick, right? Like the psychology of how people make decisions and I call it the psychology of persuasion, even though you didn't know, you probably didn't frame it that way in your mind, right? Or we didn't frame it that way in your mind, but at the same time is when you're the number one rule which we all teach is empathy, right? So it sounds like you developed a really amazing habit of being able to get in their world, show empathy, and then help them with a solution. And then the
Right.
third one is you're not like you were used to having models, right? Like scripts, dialogues. So it
That's
wasn't
right.
so that's that's really in my opinion, I think those are the three characteristics that if you don't have those things, it's going to be really hard to succeed. Would you agree?
Yes.
If you don't develop
Those are
those
three of them,
over time,
right?
right?
Right. So real estate is not complicated, but there's so many ways to do it and arrive at your result that you
Mm,
need those models and you need certain things to be able to implement those models no matter what they are.
awesome. So when when did you decide to leave your full-time job as a police officer and walk me through how it was that hard, was that easy? What was the emotions that were happening behind that decision?
So craziest story. Remember I said that I thought I would be a police officer for 20 years and then I'd just retire and have a little real. So
Yeah,
keep in mind, I did not get my license with the goal of quitting real estate
right, right.
or quitting police department. So
Yeah.
basically, being that it was 2013, 2014, a lot of police departments were still looking for ways to save money after the recession, tax revenues going down. Or we had taken a pay cut on top of me taking the pay
Ah,
cut to leave Sonic.
ah,
They had cut a lot of our benefits. I wasn't even planning to quit, to be honest with you. What happened is they said that, hey, your wife has a job where she can get insurance. So we're going to do spousal carve out and kick your wife off of our insurance. I went
wow.
home that night, typed up, I had no plans of quitting, typed up my resignation letter because basically I was like, I am not running around the hood for you to tell me you're going to kick my wife out the insurance after I took a six-figure pay cut to come here and do this for the right reasons, right? I didn't need this job. I came here
Correct.
because I wanted to do the right thing.
Correct.
And basically it was, hey, I made an agreement. I have upheld my end of the agreement. There comes a point to where if you're not going to uphold yours, I'm not going to tolerate it
That's right.
anymore, especially since I'm making way more money at night in my part-time gig.
Exactly. You
So
gotta
I
have
typed up my
walk the
resignation
line.
that night,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. There's got to be a line, right? There's got to be a set of principles that you just, it's like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So the next day I went to work, left my resignation laying on the seat of my private vehicle while I was on patrol. Didn't know I was going to quit. Didn't tell my partners. I still talk to my partners to this day. Love them. Had great ward partners. And literally at the end of the day, I was like, guys, I'm quitting. They're like, you're what? I was like, yeah, I'm done. So I actually went in, turned in my resignation to my lieutenant. My major met me coming out the door and said, am I going to see you again? And I kind of looked at him. He's like, no, I'm serious. Are you coming back? I just need to be prepared. I was like, no, I'm going on sick leave tomorrow. So I took my 2 week sick leave and I came back and turned in my equipment and that was it. So literally it was police officer one day to no job the next without really a plan other than, oh, I know I can make money in real estate.
right, right.
So
And in your mind at that point, it sounds like it was a little easier to do because of the situation with your wife, where it was like, you know what, that was
yeah,
the line. Like
absolutely.
the seed might have been there, but then like that was the tipping point.
That was it. Yeah.
Huh.
So
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So now you're full time real estate. What happens?
Yeah. So
What
here's the
happens
cool
next?
thing. I immediately made the decision that I wanted to double my business. So I basically said, you know what? I'm going to continue working 100 hours a week if that's what it takes. And I'm going to
Hmm.
go from 35 to 70. So my first year in real estate, I'm going to do 70. I kind of talked to every local realtor that was a big name that was selling real estate that would give me any information at all.
Yeah.
All of them told me I couldn't do it, by the way. They all said you might get 50 if you're lucky. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, if I could do 35 at night and not ever having a day off for 18 months in a row, I know I can do 70.
Right.
So I did 72 the following year,
Wow.
which was my first full time year, no assistant or anything. And then I kind of joked, the team almost came about as an accident because literally at that point, it got to the point where my wife was like, you're never coming home. I thought you did this so you wouldn't have to work 100 hours a week. And I was like, okay, I'll hire an assistant. So
Yeah.
I hired an assistant. So of course, then my business kept growing. And she's like, "You're still never at home." So I was like, "Fine, I'll hire a buyer's agent." So the team was almost an
The
accident,
blessing and curse of being a driver, right?
right? Absolutely. So that's kind of how the team came about originally. So
Wow. Okay. And then so your assistant was your first hire, and then who was your next hire, and why did you decide to hire that person? What was the thinking behind that?
yeah, so the assistant was the next hire, and definitely a buyer's agent was the next hire after that. Once I started hiring people, the hardest hire for every team leader, in my opinion, is the assistant
Mm-hmm.
because that's the salary and it's your
Mm-hmm.
first salary. And you're in your head, you're like, oh, I want to be a responsible boss, right, or employer. I don't want to hire people and have to lay them off because I can't pay them. So can I really do this,
Yeah,
right?
a lot of emotion packed into that first hire. A lot.
That's right. Yeah. If you care about it, like, so I've never
Yeah.
laid anybody off. Even during COVID, I told all my people, I was like, I'll make my money coaching. Y'all just sell enough so I can break even and pay the bills, and I'm keeping everybody on board. Everybody's getting a paycheck, right? Like that was the way I thought about it.
Yeah.
And then my next hire was a buyer's agent, just because all the coaches essentially said, "Hey, you got to hire a buyer's agent so that you can free up your time to go do the listings." So
Right.
that's essentially what I did.
And was that how did that work? Did that work well?
So it really did. I was very fortunate. My first hire was a good guy. He passed away last year,
Mm.
but he was a great guy. And honestly, I was getting about 70 buyer leads a month at that time that I was working. I literally went cold turkey and gave them all to him. I was like, I'm
You're
giving you
like,
70 leads a
I'm
month.
done with these. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Just take them out.
And
Yeah.
so my goal is for me to still sell 70 houses a year,
Hmm.
but to do all sellers. So that first year, 72 was 42 buyers and 30 sellers.
Okay.
So I basically said, I want to go from 30 to 70 sellers in 1 year is what
Right.
I said I was
Kind
going
of
to do, which
reverse.
I
Right.
did. Yep. So I just, I was determined to take all the free time that he gave me by working buyers and take listings with that. And somebody in my office who's still a big name agent here in the city, when I was kind of discussing with him because he was always wanting to talk to me, and I was kind of like, what do I hire next or whatever? And he said, well, you can't give up your listings. And I said, why not? He said, you only listed 30 houses. I said, yeah. He said, well, you don't know how to take listings yet. Until you can take 50 listings a year, you can't list houses. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
You're like, all right, new goal. Here we go. Let's knock
Exactly.
this one out
So
this year.
yeah, so I actually set my goal at 100. I was like, he said 50, I'm going for 100. Like
Yeah.
literally, that's where my goal to take list 100 houses in a year came from.
Yeah.
So that's what I set out to do that year. I was like, I'm going to try to list 70, have my buyer's agent go sell 30 or 35 buyers. That's going to put us over 100. He's going to make a very nice six-figure income.
Yeah.
I'm going to make good income, and we're all going to go from there. So
Yeah, in most markets, that 100 mark is when it starts getting really fun,
it
financially.
is. It
Yeah,
is.
as long as you keep your costs in control, of course. But
That's right.
yeah,
That's right. So, yeah.
nice,
So
nice.
that's what we did. So that
And then the
year, I
team
think we
grew from
sold.
there, and you just
Team grew
started
from
adding
there.
from there.
Yep, I think we sold 106 that year. I think I did right at 70. I probably had more buyers than I wanted. I probably still did about 10 or 15 buyers that first year, not as many as like still police officer friends, that kind of stuff, right? That I didn't give up right away. And so we did 100. That's kind of where the team started. But once I did that, I was kind of off to the races, right? Like I hired another three or four agents. Once I understood that, hey, I can hire agents and I now have revenue, so I can buy more leads to support
Right.
those agents. And
Yeah.
I now know that I can train them to be successful. Now, doesn't mean there weren't some growing
Oh yeah.
pains in there, but once
Oh
I
yeah.
understood the model, I very quickly made the decision that I want to own a business. I don't want to own a job because running a team, being in production, and trying to support your agents is a lot. That's
It's a lot.
essentially two full-time jobs again. So I
Yes.
very
You're
realized that
like,
if I was
wait, I
ever going to
wait,
have,
I thought I left two full-time jobs. No, I have them again. I haven't.
yes,
And I think
yes.
that's
So it
important.
ended
Could
up
you
being
talk a
this
little bit
10-year
about that?
road of how you get out of two jobs.
Yeah, could you
So.
talk a little bit about that? Because the team, there's a lot of people right now that are in that position, and it's the toughest position for them because they are essentially operating two full-time jobs, and they might not see it that way, treat it that way. They think something's wrong potentially. They might have all of these thoughts going through their head. Like, what helped you? tr- Like, how long did it take you? Any advice you can give? I would say, like, when you go from adding a couple agents, now you're trying to get out of production so you can focus on playing that business, more of the business owner CEO role.
Yeah, think big. So I think way too many people try to get out of production way too early, and they
Mm,
try to get out of production so that they don't have to work. You're going to work just as much on the
right,
team.
right.
I think you should have 15 to 20 agents because five of them can quit you at any time. So if you get out of production with 10 agents and five quit, then you're back in production.
And I
One of
see
my
that happen
goals was
so
to
many
never
times.
get a job back.
Yeah.
Um, and by having that rule, or that I'm never going to take a job back, and by the way, I haven't been 100% successful at it, right? There's been setbacks, but by
That
having that
happens to
rule
everybody.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But it forced me to take my time to get out of production because I felt like I could get out of production at 10, but it forced me to wait till 20 because I was like, well, if I get out of it now, I might get the job back, and that would be violating my rule, right? And I
Mm,
was lucky enough that I had a coach literally every time we got on a call, she's like, what are you doing with the extra time? Right? Like if you're not selling as much, what are you doing with the extra time? And I would have to tell her what I was doing at that time to show her that I wasn't not working, that I was taking advantage of the situation, number one, or not taking advantage of the
yeah.
situation. And every phone call, she was whispering in my ear, let it happen naturally. Don't force it. Let it happen naturally. Let it
Mm,
happen. That was some of the best
such
advice I've
great
ever
wisdom.
gotten.
Such
Yes.
great wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah, because if you force it, then there's so many things foundationally that can go wrong if it's and I like how she used that word naturally because obviously you're building, you're building, but it's like getting the people, process, and tools to all come together. I think is what she was saying, right? Is like
Yeah.
making sure that system that systematic process with the people, process, and tools all coming together to get to that 15, 20 mark. And
Right.
is that what she meant by let it happen naturally? Is that what she
Yeah,
meant?
so she meant that, and she also meant that you generally need three listing agents to replace you.
Got it.
So if a lot of people try to think, oh, I'm going to hire a listing agent to replace me, and then they kind of force it with one agent. Well, I learned that it's really hard to keep listing agents, much harder than to keep a buyer's agent.
Extremely hard.
As soon as they think they can take listings without you, they're
Yep.
gone. So,
Yep.
and that's why I don't do that model, by the way, now. A lot of coaches disagree with me, but I do residential specialists. I let all my agents do listings and buyers. Now, if you're brand new and you never sold a house, you're not getting a bunch of team listing leads.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to prove
Yeah, you got
yourself.
to prove it. Yeah,
Um,
but they still
but
have an
but I don't
opportunity to
do.
work their way up to getting, getting listed
Yeah.
leads. Yeah.
That's right. But I got so tired of 6 months to get train a listing agent, get them where they could take listings, and then they would work for 1 year and then they left every time.
Yep.
Right? They would
Yep.
never stay longer than a year after I made them successful.
Yep.
Buyers agents I could keep for a few years, maybe 5 years, maybe seven, maybe three, whatever. Right?
Yep.
But listing agents, I never could keep one longer than 18 months, and I was just
Yep.
like, I'm done with this. I'm just going to let all my agents take listings. Why keep going through this cycle? So. Um, but
Very,
yeah, so
very.
what she meant was if you're going to have a listing agent model, which probably is best for smaller teams,
Yeah.
that you need three to replace you. Because if I'm listing 100 a year, two will probably list 50 each, right? They probably won't sell as many of those listings as I sold. And now I'm having to split the commission with them. So if I'm selling 100 a year, in order to sell 100 a year, and make the same money, I really need to sell 150 because I got to split the commission, which means I
Right.
need three people to replace my
Right.
100. And that was great wisdom. So,
That is really good wisdom. Awesome. Wow, we could do a whole podcast on this team structure. This is really, I love talking about team structures because everyone's got a
yeah,
different opinion on how to do it, and
yeah,
it's really awesome to see it. That's it's funny because when we were, I kind of hijacked. Maybe that's I took a shortcut, but I considered a genius shortcut because of my long term goal. But I'm not recommending this for everybody. But I actually took my top uh, two listing agents and I made them junior partners. And the reason why I did that is because I knew that my goal was not to. I was actually going to eventually have somebody else manage my team, which I have now. But my goal was to build other businesses, and so one of my strategies is I'm willing to give up a small percentage of equity, so I don't have to. If I can count on having people stay around longer, because I did the calculation on it. I'm not recommending that for everybody, by the way, if you're listening to this, because there's a lot of downside to bringing on junior partners. That's a whole nother podcast. But the reason why I bring that up is um, because I think there's so much wisdom in what Donnie said is how you structure your team. And I had the same experience. The same thing was happening to me where you pour in these listing agents, they would just develop this unbelievable skill set, and next thing you know, they knew, and you can't blame them necessarily if there's not enough incentive. You can't, it's not like you can blame them because I think most top producers get to that point where they start thinking, okay, what's my next step, right? And so, but I like the idea. So now, if I heard you right, you have a model now where they come in, they start working buyer leads, and then after they prove themselves, they're able to get access to listing leads. So they're developing the skill set of both working buyers and sellers. Everybody on your team, did I hear you right on that?
yes. With some caveats, the vast majority of our listing leads do go to our mentors. We have some agent mentors that have been around for a long time that are in great team culture
Yeah.
because we are always hiring agents and trying to grow, right? You don't run a team of 50 agents without any turnover. You got to be growing. You're either moving forward or moving backwards. You're never sitting still, put it that
Yeah.
way.
Okay.
So we do have some agent mentors, and I do give them the vast majority of our team leads. That's kind of incentive and part of the way that they get paid to be agent mentors. Is by giving most of our listing leads to them, but they are available to other agents as well. So.
Nice, nice. And so Donnie's been really humble in this podcast. So I just want people to give a context of who Donnie is and what his production is. So if you don't mind, what's your top transaction number that you've had on your team? What's the best number in 1 year so people can get some context of
As
what
far as sales, like
transaction total
total
transaction. Yeah,
transactions,
total
like
transactions. Yeah.
450 something, 460
I love
maybe.
I
So,
love that. So,
yeah.
folks, if you're listening, and this is, I mean, that if you're doing 450 transactions, you're in the top 1%. I think you got to be in the top 1% of real estate, right? If you're doing
I
one per
think so.
doing, it's got to be top 1%. I haven't looked at the stats in a little bit, but last time I looked, if you're doing over 400 transactions, you're in the top 1%. So just so you guys have a little context with Donnie's wisdom here when he's giving it. And so what I'd like to talk about next is what was your like for those people that are running a team now, right? And now they have to now you need other people to help you run that team. Let's talk about that next because that's a whole another set of challenges now, right? It's one thing when you're doing all the training, you're kind of running the team, right? And now you're like, okay, I need other people to help me. You mentioned, mentorship programs. So it'd be really interesting to hear about what you did to go to the next level now to have other people help you grow your team.
Yeah, man, that's the challenge, right? So I always tell people it is more fun helping people buy and sell houses than it is running a team, but it is more rewarding to run a team. Like when
Right.
the agents get it, especially
Yeah.
if they were solo at another company, they've been in it for a year and they're about to get out of the business, and then they come to you and they make six figures their
I
first year
love
with you,
that.
right? You're like, I
I
changed
love
their
that.
lives. They were about to have to go back into a job
I
and
love
give up
that.
on their dream.
Yeah.
So it is much more difficult to rely on other people than to just go show houses for yourself
Yeah.
or list houses. So I try to think of how it went for a long time up until just under 3 years ago now. 3 years ago now, I ran the team myself. I had obviously three or four assistants at that point helping me run the team.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
doing it all myself as far as the leadership, all the training, everything, and it was a job. It was a big job. I
Yep.
did try different versions of squad leaders or mentors or team leaders, whatever you want to call them. Never could make it work long term. We have a temporary mentor program now for new agents and seems to be by far the best model I've come up with. But
That's great.
I flopped at because my process was I'm the team leader. If I have five team leaders with 10 agents under each one or 10 with five under each one, however you do it, whatever works for you, then that's kind of my leverage. And of
Hmm.
course, pay those people to do that position, incentivize them to do it. Just never could make it work because what happens is you still have 50 agents calling you saying, "Hey, I spoke to my mentor, but I wanted to see what you thought also." And they just never built and I'm like, why am I paying it? Like my squad leaders would literally come to me and go, "Donnie, you shouldn't pay me anymore because I know they're all calling you anyway." Like they literally came to me and said, "You should just quit paying me." So, so that was a very tough model.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what I did was hire a COO. He was an agent on my team. I knew he had amazing work ethic because he was in car sales. He was like fourth in command at this large regional car sales company,
Mm. Mm.
um, making very good money there, working 50 or 60 hours a week there, and then selling 15 houses a year on top of that as an agent on my team.
Yeah.
So I knew he could do some of the same stuff that I had done early in my career, work ethic
Right.
wise.
Right.
And he wanted the job. Honestly, when I said I was going to start looking for a COO, at that time, I think I had an executive assistant and I had my daughter working for me who was kind of potentially in the running. She had kind of been with me from the beginning as an assistant or
Yeah.
from very early on.
Hmm.
And this guy, when I opened that position, anytime I open a position up as leadership, I generally open it up to my team as well. So I generally say, if you want to apply, you can apply
Yeah, that's
also.
smart. That's smart.
Yeah.
That way they don't feel
Okay.
like
And
they weren't considered at all. Even if they don't get it, they
absolutely.
they at least
Well, and they know real
understand
estate.
the thought process of what actually goes into it. Yeah.
That's right, and he wanted the job. I mean, when we interviewed him, he was the guy for the job. Now, ultimately, I lost a couple of my leadership staff after that because even though they were involved in the decision and said he was more qualified than them, they still got their feelings hurt afterwards and left. Right, people? That's the world we live in. That's why I say it's easier to sell houses than to lead people. Uh, but he has been awesome. So he has been now he's been with me on the team for close to 5 years. He is a partner in my Knoxville team. I kind of like you mentioned earlier, junior partners. Everything, every business I have except for my rental portfolio business and my original Morrow Group team has a
Hmm.
partner. That COO does get paid on bonus of the Morrow Group team, so he is similar to a
Yeah.
partner. He's just not on paper,
Right.
but he is
Right.
bonused on profit.
Right.
Um, And part of that's because he likes having a little salary too, because
Yeah, yeah,
there's most teams don't make money at least 1 month a year, right? So he does like that salary. He's got a 1 year old, so I get that
yeah.
also.
I respect that.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely, right. That was important to him, and he took a big pay cut, by the way, to come work full time for me.
yeah.
So I
You
respect.
gotta have respect for that when somebody's willing to
That's
see the vision of what you're
yes,
doing. And to me, those people you want to try to make sure that they're set up to at least feel. I don't want to use the comfortable, but feel enough that they can make sure they're set up so they can focus on the job and not worry
that's
about.
right. That's right.
Yeah,
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 and hopefully someday he will be the partner. Hopefully someday he'll be the partner running the team, so I
right.
can, have a little bit lighter work schedule. I'm almost 50. I'm not going to retire next year or anything, but semi-retire in the next 10 years somewhere along the way, right? It's not my goal to work
Yeah,
forever.
yeah.
Even though I have a really good work ethic, and everybody's like, "You're never going to retire." In my mind, I keep thinking I want to. So anyway, he's been on board for 3 years. So now our structure is basically him and I run the team together. We have four assistants that do paperwork and help us on the team, but mostly do paperwork for the agents.
Hmm.
Him and I do the training, handle the agent calls. We do have a mentor team that helps a lot of new agents to try to take a little bit of that pressure off of us.
Okay.
But basically, I ran the team up to 30 something agents by myself. Him and I are running at 50. He is handling more of the agent calls than I am, without a doubt. And he's got a great work ethic, and that's worked out really well. I think he enjoys it a lot, so that helps obviously as well. He hasn't been answering to agents for 10 years now, so that makes it a little easier. Because again, no matter what you do, ultimately you're like, okay, I just want the phone to quit ringing today, right? And he's not at that
Yeah,
point yet, so I think that helps also. So that's the structure right now that we're running
that's
this with.
great. That's great. And what do you uh, what do you see happening in real estate? Is there any trends or anything that you really have your eye on, or anything you think is important for the up and coming real estate team to really focus on over the next 1 to 3 years with everything that's happening in the market? I know it's
So
kind of a
I'm
loaded
so
question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so basic and down to earth. A lot of people probably think, oh, AI or something, and that stuff is probably all important.
Hmm.
Honestly, my biggest trend is always focus on the fundamentals. They work in every market. I do jujitsu, right? And what is it? Something like 90% of all jujitsu matches are won with 20 moves. We know 1,000 moves, but
Yes.
20 of those moves win all the matches.
So true.
And the fundamentals are the same way in real estate. I don't care what AI does. If it connects you with a lead, if you can't convert that lead when you go show them the house
That's right.
physically, or they don't
That's right.
like you, then it doesn't matter. So
Yep.
I think the biggest trend you can do is absolutely embrace the process and embrace the fundamentals.
Yes. I call it working hard smart. So like,
Yeah, hard, smart,
but
yeah. And
yeah,
I say work works, right? Like that's one of
yeah,
my favorite
that's right.
Donnieisms. Work works.
The
So
work works. It really does, and that's one of the things that I think that.
yes. So I think the best, yeah. So if you want to put that in maybe a more simplified version, almost every agent I interview, when I say, what can I do as your broker to help make sure you're successful? I want to make sure I can help you. What do they say? Training. Okay. All right. I can prove to you that training doesn't make agents successful, right along with all that other stuff. So let me prove it to you. Would you agree that there are independent brokerages that do nothing? And then there's the, say, Keller Williams of the world that supposedly are the best trading brokerages in the world, right? Well, why is it that across the country, those brokerages that do zero training, their agents average about 4 transactions a year? The brokerages supposedly had the best training programs in the world, their agents average about 4 transactions a year. So if training makes agents successful, why aren't those brokerages agents doing double what the ones that do zero training are doing? It's implementation. It's the implementation of the fundamentals consistently. Man, first of all, I just hope this helps somebody out there, right? Like, people always say, I always kind of tell people I run a team for two reasons. One is for a little bit of freedom of my time. I do luckily get a little bit more freedom doing it this way. So I am buying a lifestyle a little bit. And two, to help agents succeed. And I know that sounds corny because yes, I'm not going to do it for free. And yes, I'm in it for the money. There's no doubt about it. But I can go make the money on my own. Probably make more money on my own selling houses, to be honest with you. So I say that I do this to be able to help the agents and for the lifestyle for sure. So I hope this does help somebody. First of all, is why I say that. And then number two, I mentioned earlier, I have a couple Donnieisms. I mentioned work works. Anybody who's in the bodybuilding or working out world all kind of knows who Ronnie Coleman is. And I cleaned it up, but I still his saying, everybody wants to sell a lot of houses, but they don't want to do house selling stuff. Just like he used to say, everybody wants to be big, but they don't want to lift big weights, right? A little more colorful with that. Okay, go do the house selling stuff, y'all. You got to do the house selling stuff. Period. Yes. Yeah. If they want to interview me, pretty easily find me through socials, Morrow Group or Donnie Morrow on Facebook, Coach Donnie Morrow on Instagram, Morrow Group EXP on Instagram. Those are all my main four pages. So yeah, I should be pretty easy to find. So yeah, definitely. I appreciate you having me.